Hi, everybody. My name is Christine Melosa Basquiat Whaley. I'm a prophetic artist. I'm also very nervous because I don't do this very often, so I'm going to be reading from paper. So what does that mean to be a prophetic artist? I'm what you would call a Christian. I don't really like the Christian label because of what the hearts of man have turned that into, but I do attend an amazing Christian church out of Jamaica, Queens. It's called Church City, under the pastorship of Richard Ishmael, who happens to be a Christian hip hop pioneer and goes by the name of Richie Righteous. And if I guess I had to pick an identity, I self-identify as a royal servant of God's kingdom. So what I do as a prophetic artist is I paint under in the presence of the Holy Spirit. So most of my paintings include Christian themes and a word from God from the Bible. I do that as a sacrifice of my gift to God who gave it to me. I see my talents as a gift from God that I was gifted to share with the world so that He can be glorified in everything that I do. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Jamaica, Queens. Briarwood specifically. I paint under the moniker Melosa Basquiat as a tribute to my cousin, the late Jean-Michel Basquiat, and the Basquiat legacy of activism. My mom, my Carmel, is Jean-Michel's dad's sister. This is my mom right here. And this is Jean-Michel's father. He's the oldest one here, and their brother, Leslie. This is my grandmother who raised me up here, and my grandfather. This is my mom with Jean-Michel's mom and dad in Brooklyn in 1964. When she moved here, she lived with them. Here's another picture of my mom and his parents and his mom. Oh, I went backwards. Sorry. A few pictures of Jean-Michel when he was very young. These are pictures from our family photo album that I wanted to share with you guys. That's a picture of Jean-Michel, his mom, and his sister, and Jean-Michel as a baby. Sorry. My name Melosa means sweet in Spanish. It was a name that was given to me by my sorority sisters. I was a sister of Lambda Phi Upsilon sorority, which is a local sorority out of Stony Brook University, where I received my bachelor's degree. They gave me that name because anytime anybody would describe me, they would always describe me as sweet. So visually, a lot of my works are influenced by Jean-Michel. And much like Jean-Michel, I incorporate text into my work. And just like with Jean-Michel, the words are the most important. I was raised by the matriarch of the Basquiat family, our late grandmother, Cherestine Basquiat. And I will show you a picture. That's my grandmother. Cherestine, or Titine, or meaning little teen, was her nickname in Haitian Creole. She was a well-known hat maker, an activist, and a political prisoner in Haiti under the Papa Doc regime. At the age of 40, she opened her very first hat shop. She even purchased my grandfather's first store. My grandmother was really bossed up. She went on to be a well-established businesswoman. She owned several stores, or bazaars is what they called them. They sold hats and other goods like costume jewelry, gifts, fabrics, and fine crystals. She owned a massive gingerbread-style home built from the ground up that had orchard trees in the back and fruit trees in the back and a swimming pool. This was uncommon for a dark-skinned woman to be part of the elite, so she built this empire on her own. Her house was only the third house to be built in the neighborhood, and she created a very comfortable upper middle life class for our family on Rue El Camo in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Unfortunately, all of that changed in the mid-1950s when Papa Doc Duvalier came into power. My grandparents, Cherestine and Léonce Basquiat, were activists assisting in the campaign against Duvalier, who was then a candidate in the 1957 election for the Haitian presidency. My grandmother would hold meetings in her shop for Louis Desjoie, one of the frontrunners in the 1957 presidential election. After Duvalier won the presidency through voter fraud and intimidation, everyone who ran against him, campaigned against him, or even voted against him became a target, including my family. You'll see from some of these newspaper clippings that they exiled the candidate was exiled to Puerto Rico after he lost because of fear of death, pretty much. And he was recounting in this newspaper article how all of his supporters basically were receiving threats of death. So Duvalier exiled most of his supporters through the use of a militia which is called the Tonton Macoute. The Tonton Macoute were basically a death squad whose primary goal was to carry out extrajudicial killings, forced disappearances, and political repression for the dictatorship. One night, as my grandmother was locking up to go to bed, she looked out her bedroom window and saw a group of men standing across the street talking by a car. She turned off the lights, went to bed, and didn't think anything of it. Shortly after, the Tonton Macoute stormed the home and arrested my grandmother, accusing her of flickering the lights to warn the opposition. During the attack, my mother, who was a teen at the time, hid under a desk. She later recounted how one of the soldiers had made eye contact with her, but he just held his finger to his mouth as if to say hush. When questioned by the other soldiers, he lied and told them he'd checked under the desk and there was nobody there. The Tonton Macoute were known to rape or even kill their young female prisoners. So I'm grateful that God softened the soldier's heart and allowed my mother to live that day. My grandparents were taken as political prisoners, and my mother was taken to a safe house. My grandfather, who was very ill and his final stages of cancer at the time, was released, and 2 days later, and was placed under house arrest. My grandmother, who they saw as the bigger threat of the two due to her influence and her take-no-crap demeanor, was held for 8 days, during which they tortured her severely. She was returned to our family home bloodied, her face had been beaten, and she was almost unrecognizable. My grandmother was a devout Catholic and a strong believer in God, so she relied on his strength to get through. And many times when I would ask her how she got through 8 days of torture, she would tell me that she simply prayed. That's all she did the whole time, was pray, and it got her through. While my grandparents still remained under house arrest, my Uncle Eves was at the local post office speaking to a friend. And I think I have a picture of my Uncle Eves. That's my Uncle Eves in the middle. And he was talking to his friend about how he had so much dislike for what the dictatorship was doing to the country and what they were doing to his family. And on his way home from the post office, I guess one of the soldiers overheard him speaking at the post office, and my uncle was never to be seen. We never were able to bury his body, and the rumor was that he was buried under the presidential palace. Because of my grandmother's activism, her home, her businesses, they were continually being raided. Everything was taken from her, and my family was forced to move several times. One by one, my grandmother sent her children to the U.S. for safety, and my Uncle Gerard, JEAN-MICHEL's father, which was the first one to be here. And then my uncle came here second, and my mom came here last, and then my grandmother followed after my grandfather passed away from prostate cancer. My grandmother came here to raise me and my 3 siblings, and pretty much the rest is Black history. As some of you know, my cousin JEAN-MICHEL went on to be one of the most notable artists of our time. I actually found this quote. I don't know if this is an actual JEAN-MICHEL quote, but it was something that spoke to me. And when I tell you my testimony a little further, you'll understand it a little more. A little bit about JEAN-MICHEL. His 1982 Untitled painting of a skull, which he painted at the age of 21, sold at auction at Sotheby's for over $110.5 million. And that's the most for any American artist, not just a Black artist, for any American artist. In 2021, Tiffany's, the luxury jewelry store, released a painting titled Equals Pi, which remains on display at their flagship store in Manhattan. The painting in Tiffany's signature Robin's Egg Blue was used in their ad campaign featuring Beyonce and Jay-Z. You see the play on the blue. They have the blue painting in the back, Jay-Z with the hair, and Beyonce, they play off the whole blue ivy. JEAN-MICHEL's face adorns many walls, and he is the subject of many upcoming artists' very own paintings, including my own. And this is a work in progress that I'm working on. It's not finished yet. He appears on jackets, hats, shoes, pillows, you name it. My husband's wearing a hat. My book bag's right there. Even with his short life and untimely death, he continues to shock and inspire a generation after generation with thousands of pieces of art that he left behind. Children get to learn about him as part of Black history, and authors have numerous books about him, including the children's book where the cover looks a lot like my son, but nothing like Jean-Michel. There are currently over 200 never-before-seen paintings on display at the Starrett Lehigh Building in Tribeca in an exhibit entitled Jean-Michel Basquiat, King Pleasure. The exhibit was put on by my cousins, Janine and Lisanne, and their stepmother, Nora Fitzpatrick. And I recommend everybody to go and visit, especially if you're a fan of Basquiat, because there's so many gems that are on display, and they really tell you who Jean-Michel was as a man. And who better to tell the story than his family, the ones who knew him. They did an awesome job telling his story, and I'm so proud of what they did. Unfortunately, I never got to really know Jean-Michel. I was only 12 years old when he passed away. So I didn't get to absorb any of his knowledge or get any words of encouragement from him to keep going. But what I did get was his art. And his art tells us so much of the story that I always felt his presence even in my life, even though he wasn't here. One of the things I learned while studying Jean-Michel's work is that the words are the most important. The pictures just tie the message into a pretty little package with a bow. The paintings explore the themes of oppression, race, self-identity, mortality, religion. He paid close attention to the plights of marginalized people, specifically the plight of Black people through the transatlantic slave trade. This was a few pictures I took of the exhibit. So here's a few of the paintings that he has that display the themes. You know, this one talks about the slave ships. And there's, you know, the word, like I said, the words are very important. So he covered topics like imperialism, capitalism, slavery, colonialism. He surrounded himself with source materials, the books, the Bible, music, TV playing in the background. Everything he was influenced by made an appearance on the canvas, and he put everything he was feeling, hearing, seeing, and even smelling on the canvas. And he did it well. His paintings shout at you. Some of the symbols that make repeat appearances in his work are the three-pointed crown, the crown of thorns, and the halos and teeth and scars. So you'll see here there's the halos and a lot of scars. He'll do a lot of these, what look like railroad tracks. Those represent scars. In a way, his scars and the scars of the ancestors before him made many appearances on the canvases. Jean-Michel was a brilliant and way ahead of his time. While studying his work, I learned how ahead of his time he was. Issues that we face now that are prevalent in our existence in 2022 made an appearance in his work 40 years prior. For example, in this work titled Slave Auction, 1982, he talks about how the sale of the slaves never ended, it just transformed. The slave ship is here in the center, if you see that. And then this is the wave here, and then this is the sea of buyers. Those buyers are waiting offshore with the slave auctioneer, which is this figure right here, hovering over them in front of an empty platform. Because, you know, like when they did have the slave auctions, they would bring them in from the boats as the boats were coming in. They would poke and prod at the men and women and children who basically were reduced to chattel to assess their value. I can see here how he brings this into modern time with the depiction of the football player, which you see down here on this pink piece of paper, as being seen as the modern day slave. If you haven't been living under a rock for the past few years, you've heard about the NFL and what was going on with Colin Kaepernick. So Jean-Michel turns the slave auctioneer, you see the stripes on his shirt, into a referee, and the buyers joyfully waiting for the ship of slaves to come are depicted as fans in the stand. You can see the martyred slaves represented by the skull here and the crown of thorns over here, and the ancestors with the halos here, you see over here, are the ancestors with the halo above them that were lost in the dark of the sea on the journey as they were going to be sold. We didn't have any of Jean-Michel's paintings when we were growing up in our house, but my mom, she used to have, he used to make these postcards that he would sell on the street. And my mom had a few of them, and you know, one day my dad was like, "Oh, what is this?" And she's like, something that Jean-Michel did. And she kind of tossed it into the corner. She's still looking for it. And we don't even live in that house anymore, but she's still looking for it. But what we did have was a book, and that book was a catalog of his work that was given to us by my uncle Gerard after Jean-Michel had passed. And my mom kept the book hidden away in a closet. You know, we live in Jamaica, Queens, so we had to hide it. So I would sneak into the closet often and flip through the book and try to figure out what he was talking about and in all of his paintings. I didn't realize the journey that the book was going to take me on, but as you can imagine, becoming an artist and having such big shoes to fill was tough. The Basquiat legacy was something I ran away from at all costs. You get, of course, the comparisons, the people who come to gawk at you, and it just adds to all the madness that I already have going on in my head. So I started off as an art major in college, but after one semester, I ended up with a double major in psychology and sociology. I didn't start painting professionally until about 5 years ago. And it was as a form of therapy. I had turned 40. I was feeling down about myself. I started to just put it all on canvas. I was getting deeper in my faith, trying to find my identity and purpose at the same time. And then I decided to let go and let God show me what I was created to do. About 10 years ago, while having a discussion with my husband, we asked God this question: why do my people, meaning Black people, go through so much? Is there not a solution? In doing my research for these two works that I'll be discussing, I found that both Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass asked a variation of that question. I often wonder if Jean-Michel had the same question, and I think he did. Upon asking that question, God began to take me through a supernatural journey through my cousin's work with fresh new eyes so that I can see what he was saying to me through Jean-Michel. And what I mean by like supernatural journey, I mean like all these pictures were taken when I would either my GPS would glitch or I'd get lost, and I always somehow ended up in front of a mural or in front of, one time I even ended up in front of his studio. I got lost, and because I used to work as a construction project manager in the city, and I got lost in the city, and often God would take me on these, because God was telling me for a long time that you're going to paint for me, and you're going to do this for me, and I've avoided it and acted like I didn't hear his voice. And he kind of brought me through this journey of kind of like nudging me through my cousin over the last 10 years. So these pictures were all taken, like you'll see in this first picture, I was at work walking past and I got lost, went down the wrong block, ended up in front of his house. Didn't even know he lived there, but I saw the plaque there and that's how I knew. Another time we got lost, GPS took us the wrong way, and another mural. I couldn't find parking in the city, drove around for an hour. Only parking space I found in Manhattan was in front of this mural right here. I didn't grow up in a very religious home. My family was Catholic. I attended Catholic school. I attended church occasionally on Christmas and Easter. I was a product of divorced parents, and I pretty much lived a traumatic childhood. I'm not going to go into that in full detail, but it did affect my self-esteem and my ability to see my self-worth in myself. And by the time I was 19, I pretty much gave up on becoming an artist because I didn't want the comparison. I did, however, start seeking God and start seeking a sense of purpose in my life. So I gave my life to Christ and I got baptized for the first time when I was 19. From the moment I decided to give my life to Christ, the attacks on my life and the attacks on my health began. So shortly after, my friends and I got T-boned by a car driving home from a night of playing pool. Our car was totaled, pretty much folded in half. The mangled car stopped just short of flipping over the guardrail and falling onto the Van Wyck Expressway below. We were all able to crawl out of the car, just with minor neck and back injuries. Shortly after that, I became severely ill again. They kept diagnosing me with gastritis and sending me home. The pain kept getting unbearable to the point where I couldn't even stand up anymore. I was rushed to the emergency room and they found out that I had gallstones, but they also found out that I had developed jaundice, and if I didn't come in at that moment, I would have been septic and died. By the age of 25, because I was going through all these things in my health, I was like, there's no way. So I left the church. I had experienced also so much hurt at the hands of people who God said were supposed to love me that I totally gave up on him. First by my family, and first by, because I was also the black sheep of my family. So second by the church family, who had been instructed to love God and love his people, but continued to throw judgment and condemnation and shame my way. I lived pretty much a godless life until 2012, when my husband and I rededicated our lives to Christ, and we became youth ministers at a church on Long Island. That's when my current journey begins. In 2015, about 6 months after the birth of our second child, I kept getting a sharp pinch in my side. So I decided to go to the ER and get myself checked out. They took a CT scan and found I had a cyst on my pancreas about the size of a softball. Unfortunately, at the time, I didn't have health insurance, so they sent me home to wait. I was told that when a patient feels the sort of pain that I was describing, the tumor had already progressed. I had to wait almost 2 months to get a complete diagnosis. Sadly, my father's sister and I received the same news around the same time. She also had the same situation. She was sent home on hospice, and less than 2 months later, I would be attending her funeral, still not having answers about my own situation. The devil was taunting me. He kept whispering in my ear that I was going to die. But God kept reassuring me that he created me for a purpose, and my job here was not done. I had a whole artist to become. So pancreatic cancer is one of the most deadliest forms of cancer, and there's less than a 3% survival rate. But you know what my God did? He allowed me to be saved through early detection. They successfully removed the tumor along with 3/4 of my pancreas, as well as my spleen, which had been completely killed off. Yes, my spleen. And if you're a follower of JEAN-MICHEL Basquiat and his story, you probably would have learned that he started drawing at a very young age. At the age of 7, he was hit by a car and he had his spleen removed. While in the hospital, his mother bought him a book called Gray's Anatomy, and that's where he learned how to draw the body parts that appear in all his work. The spleen also makes an appearance in a lot of his work as well. You'll see that he has the same scar on his stomach that I have here. And these are pictures, and sorry if you're squeamish, of the spleen that he draws here. So what was God trying to tell me? I would go on to find out that JEAN-MICHEL and I bore the same scars, both physically from our surgery. The only difference was that my scars caused me to run away from my dream and my purpose, and his scars caused him to pursue them even further. In 2017, after turning 40 years old, I'd fallen into a deep pit of depression. Once again, I began to lose faith in religion, so I began to seek relationship with God instead. I began to study God's word for myself instead of relying on a pastor to tell me what it was. And while in therapy, my therapist suggested that I started painting again. I laughed. At first, I was hesitant. I started painting, and I kept dragging my feet. And then my husband surprised me with my first canvas and paint set and an easel. Using a frame from a broken mirror that I had found at a job site when I was working as a construction project manager, I painted my very first painting, which is titled ICWNY, which is on the screen there now. While in therapy, I also created my next 2 paintings, which is I Am a Human Being and Love Wins. These 3 canvases are where I poured all the hurt and pain that had held me back for so long, and flooded that with God's word and what he had to say about me. I stepped back and I looked at these paintings and I realized, you know what, I can do this. So in 2018, I premiered my first series, which I titled Not the Same Old Love Story. The first 40 pages continued with Love, a Personal Journey. At my very first art show, which was at the Aurea in the Hamptons, both of my parents were present to support me. Oh, sorry. Oh, I don't have a picture of that. Both of my parents were present to support me, including my mom, who I had been previously estranged from. In 2018, we also left our previous church after a literal sign in a tree told me that it was time to leave. We found our current church home, and it's the best decision we ever made for our lives. In 2019, my husband and I made the decision to get baptized as a public confession of our faith and the commitment to serving the Lord. In 2020, the pandemic hit, and I lost my very lucrative job as a construction project manager, and I started painting full-time. In September 2020, while I was home alone with my children, I started to get a sharp pain in my chest. I thought it was heartburn because I have reflux disease, so I tried to go back to bed. I woke up again, the pain was really intense. I began pacing back and forth, begging God not to take my life and take me from my children. I literally felt my life leaving my body. Then I started to get really, really hot, started sweating profusely. And then that's when I told my daughter to call 911 and to call my husband and tell him to come home from work. By the time the ambulance came, the pain was unbearable and I was in a panic. They hooked me up to an EKG machine, and that's when I heard the EMT say that I was having a heart attack. As they, began to prep me to take me via the ambulance, I started to scream very loudly for Jesus. And then that's when it happened. The EMT looked down and he was like, what happened? It stopped. He looked down at the EKG and there was no sign of a heart attack. So he was like, I don't understand what's going on. He puts me in the ambulance, brings me to the hospital, and they start running tests. And he's pacing back and forth because he's like, I know you had a heart attack. I saw it. So they finally do all the blood work, and they realized that I had a heart attack, and they needed to do an angioplasty and go through a vein in my arm to try to see what the damage was to my heart. When they did go in, they found that I had a 90% blockage to my left anterior descending artery, which is the main artery that carries blood to your heart. The LAD, and when you have a heart attack in the LAD, they call that a widowmaker because most people don't survive it. They were able to place a stent in and reopen my artery, and I'm here, standing here, and having this conversation with you guys here today. So that's a little bit about me. I did want to start talking about these paintings. Thank you. So we'll start with this one first. Okay, so these two paintings are part of a series that I call Image Bearers, and I have a few other paintings to that series. This was the first painting in the Image Bearers series. That's actually a painting of me and my husband. So basically what the Image Bearers series is based on Genesis 1:27, which states that we were created in the image and likeness of God. And each one of these paintings in the Image Bearers series represents people, I had started as a couple series, and then it went into a single series, but initially it started representing couples who are bearing their image and living their life to bear the image of God. So I started with a painting about myself and my husband. This is a painting I did for the pastor and first lady of my church. And this was a Christian hip hop artist that we're very influenced by, Eshawn Burgundy, that I and his wife, they have a podcast called Transparency, and I had done a painting for them on that. And then these are also part of the series. The first one, the first single painting of the series is this We Fight, which is a painting of Frederick Douglass. I'm going to talk about a little bit of the symbols that I used. If you see here, I used the boxing gloves. I have a painting here. Is it up here? I don't know. I think I showed it to you guys already. You see this one here. This painting here is called The Good Fight. It's a painting that I had done in 2000. I don't remember the year anymore. It was before the pandemic, but it's a really big painting. This is a self-portrait. This is pretty much was a picture of me, a self-portrait of myself, and with a mask, pretty much, because I don't like, and then JEAN-MICHEL, and then you'll see here my scar in that painting. So that just represents me. So in that painting, I brought those gloves into this painting. But they represent the fact that let's go. Let me go from the beginning. Sorry, Frederick Douglass. I wrote here "reclaim the image" because Frederick Douglass. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. He was the most photographed man. Sorry, that's where I was going. Photographed person in the 19th century, correct? And he wanted to reclaim the image of the black person because of the depictions that were happening at the time were so bad that he wanted to make sure that he took as many pictures that showed him in a positive light that he can. So he sat down to be photographed with so many people. So that's why I put the words "reclaim the image" here to kind of make emphasis on reclaiming the image that we were created to be. You know, the words agitate, agitate, to agitate are here. I'm trying to think of all the other symbols. Red, black, and green are represented there. The royalty, the crown, much like JEAN-MICHEL, the three-pointed crown, he used that to signify importance of the figure that he was painting. So that's why I do have the painting, the crowns on both figures. Pictures in progress, it's one of it was a speech, correct? A speech that he had, it spoke about how the effects of reclaiming the image pretty much. Genesis 1:26, this also talks about the image bearer, bearing the image and likeness of God. And 1 Peter 2:9, we are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people. A lot of my paintings, I always put a scripture in there because I do have pretty much a Bible study. When I do paint these paintings, I kind of immerse myself in them. And I did a lot of research, read a lot of books, watched a lot of movies. I read your thesis. Some of my source materials were pretty much the same source materials that you're using. The narrative of Frederick Douglass, Harriet, the Moses of Her People, and Dr. Archer's book. And see, Guns and Moses. Okay, so with Harriet Tubman, Guns and Moses, this was my favorite painting. This one meant a lot to me because I never learned, learning about Harriet Tubman, how she got through and was able to go back and 19 times, I think 20 actually, and if 20 if you include herself, so 19, 20 if you include herself, and freeing over 300 people, going back and forth. And I never knew that a part of her story was that she did that through discernment. And that's one of the words that I did here. And if you don't know what discernment means to the use of the Holy Spirit. Through, so what she did was, when she was very young, she had received that wound to her head. And if you see here, I put Genesis 50:20, which talks about how this wound to her head was meant to be something that was to harm her, but it ended up being something that turned into something that was her strength. So what the enemy used to harm her when they hit her over the head with, I could say threw something and it hit her over the head. I don't remember the whole story right now, but because of this wound that she had on her head, she would often go into like sort of a trance and had all these visions, and would be led by God to free everybody. And where she was going, she was able to know who was going to assist her. She was able to know, who was going to be able to give her money, what houses to stop at, where to go, all through the whole, communicating with the Holy Spirit. So she was a spirit-led person, and I never learned that in learning about her. So when I was painting this painting, that was the first time that I had ever learned that. And that's, that connection is really what really just makes this one super special to me. The term here, what's in your hand? What's in your hand? What does that mean? What do you have? What do you have in possession for you to be able to be a catalyst for change? So basically, I'll talk about this gun. As you know, Harriet Tubman didn't actually carry a shotgun. She carried a pistol. But I did use the shotgun because when they did draw pictures of her, they did use the shotgun because of the comparison between her and Moses. So they used the shotgun to make it look like a staff, and so that they can have that comparison to her being the Mosaic figure holding a staff. But she did actually use a pistol. But I did use that staff to make the reference with Moses. And, I twisted the words between guns and roses and made it Guns and Moses. Exodus 14, that's when we talk about the Exodus, the slaves' Exodus from Egypt. Let me see. What else did I miss? Oh, John 14, 1 to 4. These, I go to prepare a place for you. Those are Harriet Tubman's final words. And they're also the words that Jesus says to us that he goes to prepare a place for us. So those were her final words. So I did include that reference. And then, and be free or die, because she would, she did have, the reason why she did have the gun and she never had to use it was because she did use it a lot to threaten people, but she never had to use it to shoot anybody, was because she often did say that, you know, either you're going to come with me and be free or you're going to die. Like, I'm not going to let anybody go back because then you can tell people, you know, where I was, who, you know, how we went through and everything. So this statement, be free or die, is pretty much what she would say. Let me see, what else? Oh, and this here. I don't know if you can see it in the picture. You see it mostly when you see the picture, the original painting, but the word slave is actually engraved into this black square. And there's a lot of lines, and that represents the thousands that she could have freed if they had known that they were slaves. So that's what that square represents. And what else? Oh, and then also the red, the black, and the green are in this. And this represents the Holy Spirit, the halo, and the crown, the three-pointed crown, to signify her royalty. I don't know if there's anything else that I missed on the painting. I guess I'll answer the rest of the questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine Melosa Basquiat. Wow, what a comprehensive, thoughtful presentation. So now, the remaining time, we'll open it up for our Q&A. And if you'd like to ask a question, I'll just sort of give you the mic so that we're on, okay? And we'll start with Matthew, since he's right behind me, and I know that he's always asking some great questions. And then if you want to ask a question, just raise your hand. You can pull your mask down slightly while you're asking
questions. Do you intend on adding any 20th century renowned black figures to this series, like Martin Luther King Jr. or?
Yes, this is actually the latest one of the series, which is Martin Luther King. It's called Drum Major Instinct. This one's actually based on one of his last sermons, called the Drum Major Instinct. It basically talks about how everybody has the innate instinct to be a leader. Like, everybody wants to be an influencer these days. Everybody wants to be the leader of the parade. Everybody wants to be the first one. But he talks about, if you do have that desire, it's okay to have that desire, but you're going to be a leader for things like justice, peace, righteousness, truth, love. So that's what that painting is about.
Start with you.
My name is Corey David. I see that you said that the painting, where it says reclaim the image, I initially thought it was image is key with the key. If it's not that, then I wonder, what does the key represent?
Ah, okay. The key is actually is a hip hop reference. It represents, it's the let me say, it's the red, the black, and the black and the green protected by a key. If you know the song, then you would know. It's a hip hop reference from the song.
My name is Gabriel. To elaborate on Matt's question, would you be inspired to drop paintings of earlier people before Martin Luther King, like Doris Miller or Jack Johnson?
I'm actually in the process of researching a few figures that we don't really hear about very often, because that's really what I want to start covering, is people that we don't hear about very often, so we can learn more about them. Thank you.
So one of the things that I'm struck by, the scar the Jean-Michel's injury, your injury, and then Tubman's injury, right? Just that thread of physical trauma, and Douglas too. You read Douglas's autobiography. He was the victim of assault by Covey, and after that fight, decides to never be defeated again. Decides to we fight. One of the things that we've talked about in class, really interesting points from the students, is why Tubman could not be photographed and why Douglas decided to be photographed, because she's at the charge of covert operations during a war. But interesting that in this rendering of your rendering of her, the scar as the shield that she turns to a positive, for me, invokes, calls to mind the work of Jean-Michel, the work of Melosa, right? So it's just did you think about the scar and then
No.
Okay. Right. I'm thinking. I'm already. I'm just gonna walk around with these folks. You have
But it's good.
like talk shows.
Jenny Jones.
If you had to paint two other historic and like heroic leaders, who would you do?
Let me see who I was thinking of. Let me think about that one and come back. Yeah, let me think about that one and come back.
My name is Tiana, not Jalissa. You said in your whole story that you had like a god, the god guide you while you were painting and everything. I was questioning, like, does God give you the scriptures as you're painting? Like, does he like actually create the image for you in your head and you just put it on paper, or you go? Because I've been hearing you be going into research into the.
It depends. Sometimes it depends with certain paintings. I'll think with this one, what's in your hand, that was something that just kept repeating for me that week. A lot of times I'll get something from God and it'll be repeated from me for the entire week where, somebody will call me and say something and it'll be that. And then I'll go to church and it'll be that. I'll turn on the TV and it'll be that. So that's something that was just repeating in my head for a week. And it made sense when I got to church on that Sunday, and it ended up on the canvas. So that's usually how it happens.
Yeah. So my name's Magdalena. So you kind of spoke about like what inspired you to do it. I wanted to know, what was your thought process while you were making your paintings?
With these two, with these two paintings, with Harriet, I immersed myself. I watched the movie. I read every possible article I could about her. I read the autobiography. I read three books. I prayed a lot about it. Watched a few sermons. Prayed some more. And that's how it's pretty much a process. Paintings don't usually take me like a day. I'll do the figure, but the words take me the longest. So those are the parts that I really work with the Holy Spirit on, because I want to make sure that everything that I write has a certain meaning. So if it's written on a canvas, it's because I've discussed it with God before I've done it. So the figures pretty much happen pretty fast. It's the words that take the longest. I can have a painting sitting for months before I can put the words to it. I'm still trying to think of those two figures. Names is what's getting to me.
Hi, I'm Jalissa. From both paintings, I honestly think you're like an inspiration. You went through your whole story and it's really significant. My question is, for both paintings, why do you believe they're positioning Harriet is truly facing straight and then Frederick Douglass is facing sideways? Is there any opposition for that purpose?
No, there's no significance. It's just the pictures that I chose. No.
Me again. So, Frederick and Harriet both had different stories, but in the same region. In Maryland, Frederick was a writer and some could say, or all can say, a very educated man. Harriet was more of a person that took action with her work. Out of both their works, which connects to you the most?
Harriet Tubman, mostly because, you know, the connection with the Holy Spirit, that why she connects me the most.
I was noticing in the second painting, I know in the first one you said you have the black, the red, and the green all connected, but in that one, does it have any significant meaning? Because it's not all necessarily black, red, black, and green, unless you're talking about the line.
Well, the lines are green, but I actually painted this painting. You can't see here, but it's money green. It's the same color as money because she was supposed to be on the $20 bill, and we're still waiting. So, so I was like, okay, I'll do it money green because that's what the color was for.
It was the second part also. I know you said in a black box there's slaves, and it's like scratch. Is there any? I can't really see it, but is there anything scratching into the red? Because I do see more.
There's nothing scratched into the red, just the black.
Right,
Hi.
So I did some research, and I know your cousin was like really good friends with Andy Warhol. Like when you look at your cousin's work, like, do you see some of Warhol in it, like, or do you see some of it in your work?
Well, there's some projects that he did with Warhol. I think a lot of them their work is very different, but I know they did do work together where Warhol did some work and then JEAN-MICHEL would just go in and kind of paint over it.
Just going off his question real quick. I know that you were heavily influenced by your cousin, but was there any other artists besides your cousin that you were influenced by?
Not really. Like modern art, like unknown artists of today. Yeah, there are a few artists that I follow that I like, that I may be influenced by, but no, not really.
For the Douglas painting, was there like a specific reference photo that like spoke to you more than like other ones? I know in class we like looked at different ones, so I don't know if there's one that like spoke to you.
Well, this is the one that spoke to me the most because I was wanting to use a painting where he did have his hands in that posture so that I could use the boxing gloves to make that statement of still fighting. The significance of the boxing gloves, which I didn't state before, and the reference to we fight is because this fight still continues, and that's what that reference is. But yeah, I chose.
Chris, I haven't really shared with the class, just because we've been moving full speed ahead, how these paintings came to be, where they might be. Can you talk a little bit about their origin?
Oh, okay. Dr. Archer actually commissioned both of these paintings from me. He told me that he wanted a painting of Harriet Tubman and of Frederick Douglass, and we did a few phone calls. He taught me a lot. And I put his ideas onto canvas pretty much.
So these paintings, which are going to be worth millions of dollars one day, are in my house. In my house, like Tubman is protected. I joke.
Okay, thank you, Darth. That's actually really good. One of the things that I'm interested in is also when you were describing Harriet's painting, where it says what's in your hand, is it also a direction towards the person watching the art, saying like what's in your hand? Like,
yeah.
Like your phone.
Oh, well, it's pretty much a reference to like what's in your hand, meaning what's your weapon? Yeah. She held a gun. What's your weapon? Mine is a paintbrush.
Another is, since your family has a reoccurring theme of activism, do you believe that in your future generations, do you believe it's going to be a reoccurring thing?
I believe so. My son's an artist, and he's only 7. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Yvonne Hallman. I'm an alumni here. My question to you is maybe fairly simple, and I don't know if I missed some of the context, but I wanted to know, what would you want viewers to take away from each image if you could just pick maybe one?
This one, the most significant thing is the strength for weakness. That what you sometimes may think as something that may be a weakness or something that's sent to kill you, it's something that can strengthen you. So that's what I want you to take from that, because that was pretty much Tubman's story, was what was sent to kill her pretty much and to harm her pretty much, strengthened her and allowed her to save so many people. When it comes to Frederick Douglass, it would definitely be to continue to fight to reclaim the image, and to keep those positive portrayal of who we are going.
If Jean-Michel wasn't your cousin, do you think you would have still gotten into painting, or have your paintings look this way?
I've always been a creative person, so I don't think it was, it would have transformed in a different way, I think because I've spent so much time researching his work and trying to figure it out, because that's basically what I was trying to do since I was a little girl. I was trying to figure out what he was saying, and I still haven't figured out most of it. But if it wasn't for that, I'd probably be influenced by something else, yes.
My name is Chris. I was going to ask, you said because Basquiat is the legacy of yours, and you went to school for art. Did any of those other influences help you figure out your kind of art style? And if so, did you try to incorporate it into your style to this day now?
The thing is, I dropped out I dropped my art major pretty early. I was only in for a semester, so I really didn't go to school to learn how or learn through any art styles. I just paint.
Well, thank you. This all has been great. Let's give Melosa another round.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
We'd love to have you back at Old Westbury to our art gallery. Hey, Juan, can you come up for a second, please? I want to introduce you all to Hewan, the director of our art gallery here, who you all should go see, should go visit. We have one of the best art galleries here on the island, thanks to her. So give Hewan a round of applause.
Yeah, I enjoyed your story, biography, also your how Basquiat inspired your own work, and also these are two commissioned amazing work. Thank you very much. I see one of my students here.
Okay, that's my social media. If you want to follow my art, it's Melosa Basquiat, and follow me at Mind of Melosa.